Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Start, sir.
Yeah, Gautam ji can unmute yourself. Okay.
नहीं अभी नहीं हुए सर. गौतम जी अनम्यूट नहीं हुए अभी.
He has not.
Okay, I've unmuted it.
Okay. Okay, so we can begin now. A very good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many people again, and I want to express my deep sense of thankfulness to Gautam ji for accepting our request and he's with us again to talk to us. Most of us know Gautam ji because of his long association with KFI, and also he has been a speaker to this before this group. But for those who have just joined, I'll briefly introduce Gautam ji to them. Gautam ji has a BTech degree in metallurgical engineering from IIT Madras. He was principal and director of the Dow School for 21 years and was involved with the evolution of the Pathshala School and Center since 2002. Before taking up teaching, Mr. Gautam worked as a scientist in Bhabha Atomic Research Center for 5 years and was an engineering consultant for 10 years. He was also director of the Sayadri Education Center for 3 years. Presently, he is director and secretary of the Palar Center for Learning near Chennai. This center runs the Pathshala School. He has written a book on yoga. He is interested in Hindustani music, and he is a senior trustee of the Kashmuti Foundation, India. With these words, I'll request Gautam ji to give his talk. He is going to talk to us about what does understanding mean. And sir, you have any time anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour, or you can finish even early if you want to. And after that, I'll request Professor Krishna to make some observations, and then the floor will be open for people to ask questions. So this is the format. You are aware of it. Please go ahead now. Yeah, Gautam sir.
Thank you very much, Dubey-ji. And I thank the study circle in Indore for once again inviting me to share some thoughts with the members who attend this center. I want to get clear on one thing. The approximate length of this session total, including the question answers, is about 1.5 hours. Am I right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's
Yes.
what's being done. Okay. So I will speak for a little while, but what I would like to do is to speak for a little while, and then we will have a small dialogue for a little while. And then again, I can speak for another 15, 20 minutes, and then we can have a conclusion, questions, answers, all that. I hope that will be okay. As an educator, one of the things one learns very early through one's feet on the ground is that the longer one speaks, the less likely one is to communicate with the person who is listening. This listening has become a big problem. I mean, once upon a time, we could listen to long lectures. And yet, even then, about the lecture approach, there has been criticism because the brain is doing many things simultaneously. In the late 20th century, 21st century, with the research and education pointing to the need for engagement. And today the marketplace is talking about engagement. Engagement. The person who's engaged, who's alive, and there is some evidence of movement, then maybe there's a better chance of the communication having some roots. And it's not merely, conversations are not merely about extraction of information or extraction of good points, because we are talking in times when there is a fundamental truth sitting at the table, and that is extraordinarily wise and sensitive people have lived before us. They have said profound truths and gone from different parts of the world, and these truths are available to all of us at the press of a button. So in that sense, to expect that a speaker, any speaker, is going to say something which is so new, so profound that nobody has said it before, would be a little optimistic, would be maybe incorrect as well, because we have assimilated some things from what we have heard. We have, through our own experience, established for ourselves some truths or some formulae. Often it's formulae. We function on formulae long before the computer started functioning with formulae and algorithms. Human beings function on algorithms. I learned fear very early in my childhood. And then that avoidance of fear, avoidance of shame, avoidance of that which makes me uncomfortable becomes the formula on which my life runs. And there are other formulae which we gather along the way. That society says, if you're a man, how can you take an insult? If you get one, you must give back two. So that becomes another formula, another algorithm for our life. And Krishnamurti's teachings point to how we are conditioned, how we get conditioned, how we remain conditioned, and how finding some freedom from conditioning is such an important endeavor. And yet at the same time, it is not an easy endeavor. So with that as a kind of broad preamble, I'd like to say that today's talk, how do we understand something? How would we say, what is the meaning of the word understanding? It is a very important word because you find that people in schools, today we say that we teach for understanding, we don't do rote learning, we don't do rote teaching. Okay? But at the same time, we do find that a lot of what we learn becomes memory very easily. And that which is tested is usually what we have memorized or what has gone into memory. We don't actively have to memorize many things. Our survival instincts. The exam sets the tone for what the student considers important. If only somebody is going to say, please list 3 points that you got from this talk, then we start making notes about 3 points from this talk because we know that's going to be asked in the exam. So our whole orientation to understanding becomes we are trying to get something that will be valued later on. So listening, being present somewhere, like we are all present today, we are connected by the screen, by the Zoom environment. When we are connected like this, we can be here, which is very difficult, but simultaneously we can be in multiple places. We can be doing many other things. Multitasking has come of age. Multitasking was always on. The child thinking about the basketball court in the English or history or maths classroom is not new. This has been happening since time immemorial. So to give evidence of being here, it has been seen that understanding is not that easy to find out about. It's not so easy to say I have understood. Even if a very close friend is saying something, speaking about his life, giving a narrative about something he or she has learned and found valuable, it is very difficult to say, I have fully understood what you're saying. So why is this so? It is not as if I cannot repeat a few words about what that person said. It is not as if I am trained in that way, I can go chronologically about what the person said and give evidence that I have got the substance of what the person is saying. But when we listen carefully, there are tonalities to what we hear. There are feelings that are lying around in the narrative, which may not be in the words. I'll give you an example to start with. Many years ago, when I was working in the school, And I used to have these culture classes, which were conversations with the senior most students. And the students would initiate many of these conversations. And one would flow along and discover what one discovered in the course of the conversations. 3 of my old students are here. I'm very happy that they have chosen to join this conversation today. One day, one young lady said, you know, I love speed. I love sitting on a motorcycle and going at high speed down the coastal road. And she also spoke about how she and her friends found ways of avoiding the speed measurement devices and the policemen and what times were best, etc. And then she said also in the course of this narrative, which brought a lot of happiness to this young group because they could identify with this act of rebellion of going at high speed down the coast with the wind on your face. They felt wonderful about the sense of freedom, a sense of traveling very far at high speed, the beauty to it and enjoyment to it, down the coast with the sea on one side. Then she said, you know, but one of my cousins, he died. He traveled on a motorcycle and hit a tree at night. And the conversation continued. People continued to talk about policemen, the road, and everything. And I asked students, what do you think Akansha is speaking about? What is she talking about? And they said she's talking about speed and about how to avoid getting caught and how you must pick up a phone call and have an influential person's number so that you don't get caught by the policeman. And it went on for a while. There were about 30 people. And I said, okay, what else is she saying? Now, so everybody listened to the same story. And I said, I'm listening to something else. I don't know if I'm right, but I'm not hearing just the story of celebration of speed. I'm hearing Akansha asking a question. I'm hearing Akansha ask, I know I love speed. I enjoy speed. But you know, one of my very dear cousins, he died at a young age because of speed. But even then, my affinity for speed doesn't seem to change. I hear her asking, even if the death of a near one doesn't change my affinity for something, then what will change? That's what I hear her asking. Akansha had some tears in her eyes and she said, yes, Anna. That is my question. So I think the obvious narratives are there in the words and the storyline is there. But there are things that people are saying which they sometimes can't construct as well. But if we listen carefully, we can hear it very well. So I want to now move on to one very interesting piece from a very, very distinguished human being called Masanobu Fukuoka. Some of you may have read his remarkable work, The One Straw Revolution. Some of you may have seen it and may have read it. But there's one piece there, one paragraph there, where he talks about how his journey began and where it began, which is very profound. So I'm going to if I may, am I allowed to share screen, sir?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so I will share screen and put that piece up for everybody to read. Yeah, so may I request different people to read different paragraphs of this? There are only 4 paragraphs. So somebody can read the first paragraph, somebody can read the second paragraph. Okay, let me request Sanjana. Sanjana, come on. You read the first paragraph. or Kalki or Navya, anybody? I can't hear you. Are you able to see? Is everybody able to see?
Yes, yes.
People are very shy. They don't want to read even one paragraph. Somebody can read this.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, please, sir.
Okay. I was finally released from the hospital, but I could not pull myself out of my depression, in what I had placed my confidence until then. I had been unconcerned and content. But what was the nature of that complacency? I was in an agony of doubt about the nature of life and death. I could not sleep, could not apply myself to my work. In nightly wanderings above the bluff and beside the harbor, I could find no relief.
Thank you, sir. Will somebody else read the second para, please? Please join in. It's a simple thing. Pareshwar ji, आप पढ़िए.
One has to unmute them. Then and only then they can read.
Oh, अच्छा अच्छा. I'm so sorry. आप लोग कीजिए कुछ करना है तो. मैंने I don't have anything to do on this.
Navya also is not able to unmute, so let me
Okay.
see if I can unmute her. I don't know.
Okay, let me
Yes,
see what I.
I've been able to unmute.
Okay, very good. Please read, Navya.
One night as I wandered, right?
Yeah.
One night as I wandered, I collapsed in exhaustion on a hill overlooking the harbor, finally dozing against the trunk of a large tree. I lay there, neither asleep nor awake until dawn. I can still remember that it was the morning of the 15th of May. In a daze, I watched the harbor grow light, seeing the sun rise and yet somehow not seeing it. As the breeze blew up from below the bluff, the morning mist suddenly disappeared.
Yeah. Can somebody take up the third para, please?
Kalki is unmuted. She's not able to unmute.
Sanjana, you're not able to unmute. 1 second. Let's see what we can do about.
Hi, yeah, I think I'm unmuted.
Yeah, please read. Yeah.
Go on, Kalki.
Just at the moment, a night heron appeared, gave a sharp cry, and flew away into the distance. I could hear the flapping of its wings. In an instant, all my doubts and gloomy mist of my confusion vanished. Everything I had held in firm conviction, everything upon which I had ordinarily relied, was swept away with the wind. I felt that I understood just one thing. Without my thinking about them, words came from my mouth. In this world, there is nothing at all. I felt that I understood nothing.
To understand nothing in this sense is to recognize the insufficiency of intellectual knowledge. I could see all the concepts to which I had been clinging, the very notion of existence itself were empty fabrications. My spirit became light and clear. I was dancing wildly for joy. So, interesting passage, right? So here is a man who is known for organic farming, who's known for writing this profound book on sustainable agriculture, the One Straw Revolution. And his journey begins with the understanding of when he was finishing his PhD or postdoctoral work, that he understood nothing, he knew nothing. So this brings us to a very interesting question. What do we call understand? When we say we understand something, what do we really mean? Do we mean that we have a sense of what the words are meaning? If you tell me something and I can repeat it, does it mean I understand? If I ask you, what is the logic of this, and you're able to logically, you can catch the logic of things and then say, is that understanding? And Krishnaji has said a great deal about this. In fact, came across a very beautiful piece when I was searching for suitable material, and there is this extraordinary question answer session in Sanand, where Krishnaji talks about how understanding takes place. It's a discussion in 1976. And the topic is, how does understanding take place? 29 July 1976. And I will share some parts of this as, again, a screen share, a little bit of it. I'm doing something which normally I would not like to do. I've taken bits and pieces out of this and put it up, but you can always read it for the whole thing. Because the questions he raises are very profound, and I try to focus on some of these questions, and that's what I've attempted in this. So Krishnaji seems to ask, what do we mean by that word? And he says, go slowly into it. It's almost as if he is suggesting to us that our brains are in a perpetual hurry and they want to quickly answer the question. Don't we notice this? We of course see it in school, but we also see it in ourselves right through our lives. If somebody asks a question, the response is very quick. And the response, when it's very quick, it comes from our stored memory, our past understanding, and that's how it manifests itself. It's almost as if we are uncomfortable to live with the question, that we have to fill the question, that space immediately after the question with an answer. It's as if that space after the question is uncomfortable in some manner. So Krishnamurti goes further and says, is it a verbal understanding, a comprehension through verbal description? So we may ask, what does it mean to say, I have a verbal understanding? That means if you have said something, and I can repeat those words. For instance, in Pathshala, we don't have teachers and students. We have educator learners and learner educators. And if I were to ask you, or somebody were to ask you the question about what kind of nomenclature does Pathshala use, or what are the teachers and students called, you would be able to say educator learners and learner educators. However, would you have a deep understanding of it? Would I have a deep understanding of it if somebody told me this, and if somebody asked me this question? I would have to say, oh, I have a lot of questions about why somebody would do this. Why did the school change the teacher and student nomenclature to educator learner and learner educator? Was there something wrong with that? Or are they trying to communicate something else in this process? For the student and the teacher, instead of two separate words, they seem to have just used two words and juxtaposed them. One first and the other first and the second one. So is there some other communication that's going on here? What are they trying to say? So these would be the questions that would pop up in my mind if I listen to this. A comprehension through affection, or is understanding a comprehension through affection. I like you, I'm friends with you. I tell you something, and therefore you understand what I'm saying. This is again terribly common. If somebody we know well says something, we immediately understand it or immediately accept it, immediately think it's the truth. And it has very dangerous consequences in life also. Particularly in schools, people become friends and then they become enemies. Or is it an insight into something which is rather complex and confused? So Krishnaji has brought in a new word, insight. And one can say that, aha, there is something there that's beautiful that Krishnamurti is pointing to. And one can feel very excited and happy about this. But at the same time, one can also feel that one knows what insight is. I have the feeling I understand this word. I know about it because I've read it earlier. I've understood it. But do I have a taste of insight? Do I have a taste of it? Do I understand it in terms of what an insight feels like? I'm not so sure whether I have a taste of that insight or not. But certainly I recognize the word. And when insight surfaces, how it surfaces, I don't know. It's rather complex and it may be even confusing. That's what Krishnamurti is suggesting. So insight is not exactly something that I may recognize it as from my readings, but it may be something more complex. So what could that complexity be? What could that confusion be? So does understanding take place through verbal communication, which is description? Because you and I, if you are speaking English, we will understand. And if you and I are not speaking English, then we may not understand. Sometimes people worry when people from the north come to Pathashala. One of the questions they ask is about language, saying, will I be able to understand? Will I be able to manage without Tamil? But people travel all over the world. They travel to other countries. They don't have these anxieties. But coming from the north to the south or south to the north, people have these anxieties about language. Or does understanding take place not merely through words, not merely description, but going beyond the word? Which means both you and the other are free of the verbal structure, which is the nature of thought, and penetrating and having an insight. So Krishnaji raises a question here. Does understanding take place only through words? And which means you have described, you paint a picture, like you use brushes to paint a picture, you describe something in words, but going beyond the word, which means both you and the other are free of the verbal structure, which is the nature of thought. So maybe I'll take a little break here and we can discuss a little bit. People can share their thoughts, their questions, and then we can proceed further from there.
Yeah, sure.
Is that all right, Dubey?
Yes, yes, absolutely, sir. No problem. Would somebody like to make an observation? Harshad bhai, yes. Unmute yourself.
Harshad, then Hareshwar. Yeah.
Hello. Hello, are you able to hear?
Yeah, Harshad.
Okay. There was one girl in Sayadri school, and she was, during the Astachal, she was watching two clouds, and they were coming very close to each other, and she thought that it would collide, but it was very strange for her that these two clouds merge with each other without any conflict or any problem. And that gave her some insight because she had some conflict with another girl in the hostel. And she learned how to merge with somebody, without creating conflict. And also, I have myself seen how the clouds of birds, two clouds, they merge into one cloud, and the birds, thousands of birds, they don't collide with each other. So I think the nature, by just looking, one can understand many things from nature, which is non-verbal, just seeing something and something strikes us. That I think that is the way probably Krishnaji learned by walking alone in nature, observing and observing his own mind, what was happening. And in that observation, there is not so many words there. It is a non-verbal looking, whether it is looking outside at nature or looking inside. And when we are able to do that, learning happens by itself. About our own mind, about psychology, how we create many problems in relationship, how we get angry when somebody says something very unpleasant. And so most of this learning, it happens through observation without words. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you. Dinesh Wagmare wants to say something, and then Hareshwar Singh. Dinesh, please go ahead.
Sir, as far as my views are, understanding can be actually intellectual, but as far as the insight, what we are talking, that is in life there are sequence of experiencing, and this sequence of experiencing changes your state of being, including your memory structure. So that insight we can say by can only come by the having experience of something. What do you have to say?
You want Gautam ji to respond?
I'm over, sir. Gautam sir,
Is it,
to
you are saying insight is one thing and something else is something else. Sorry.
understanding can be intellectual, but insight is comes from the sequence of the experiencing which you get in the life, and that converts your state of change of state of being. That changes your state of being, including your memory structure.
Sir,
That only
very,
can-
very, very early in our life, we learn fear.
Yes.
And once we learn fear, that becomes a part of our equipment with which we face life, meet situations. Now, how is insight different from a conditioning that we? That is a good question to ask, because is it an insight? Is it a conscious? I can have a feeling that where there is fear, people will not express themselves easily. Now this can be logical also. If people are feeling fear, they won't express themselves freely. They will be anxious about how people are going to receive them. And they don't want to hear some adverse comments. So there, because of that, fear operates. I can have this understanding. It's completely logical based on the fact that people like to avoid situations where they will be either feeling some shame, or they will be challenged, or they will be shown up as wrong. People have this fear. Now, would I call this insight? I don't know.
No,
So
sir.
what exactly is an insight? And is it how does an insight differ from a logical point which one understands? It's a good question.
Sir, my views on this are actually they are linking the fear to the image, and they are having understanding of the image, not the insight into the fear energy itself. Means I mean the fear per se. They don't have any insight into it.
Sir,
They are linking.
1 minute, sir. We will go into this through what Krishnamurti is saying here very nicely. He's saying something, and I will screen share that, and we can discuss that a little bit more.
Okay, sir.
One second, sir. 1 second. Okay. Can you see this page, sir? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So what you were mentioning is absolutely true. Krishnaji does say we are talking about understanding psychologically, aren't we? An insight means having a sight in something, which then becomes the truth. And I can never go back from it. It has a transformative quality, he almost seems to suggest. That once you have an insight, you cannot say today I had the insight and tomorrow I've gone back to the same old thing. He seems to be suggesting that.
Yes, sir.
Insight will wipe away any misunderstanding. So I don't know what this kind of insight means, that seeing something so completely that I never go back to it again. So then he goes on to say, understanding implies, does it not, a mind or a brain? The whole structure of the mind listens not only to the word, but goes beyond the word and sees the deep meaning of that statement. And then there's an insight, and then you say, I understand it. I have got it. So insight implies a mind that is quiet, willing to listen, go beyond the word, observe the truth of something. So he gives examples. He goes into it very beautifully in this talk. For instance, if the speaker makes a statement like the ending of sorrow is the beginning of wisdom, how do you receive it? And he gives examples of how we can receive it. What is your reaction to the statement? And if I look at it clearly, he's suggesting and he's pointing out that normally when we hear something, there's a reaction to it. The quick answer comes out from inside our memory. Do you make of it into an idea, an abstraction? And with that abstraction, which is an idea, try to understand what he said. Ending of sorrow is the beginning of wisdom. I quickly try to somehow abstract something out of this statement and then understand what he said. Because I have to have a grasp of it, and I don't have a grasp of it. I don't know what he said. Or you listen, that is, you listen to the word, the meaning of the word, and go beyond the word and see the truth of the statement or the falseness of the statement. Now, not how to end sorrow or how to have wisdom, but whether the statement conveys a truth or a falsehood. To observe the truth or falsehood of your mind must be quiet. And then you have an insight into it. And then you say, by Jove, how true that is. So, what we normally seem to say understanding, Krishnaji seems to almost suggest that understanding implies having an insight into the problem. You go beyond our arguments, dialectical, it's immovable. As long as we keep arguing and we are unsure, that's okay, that's an exploration, but you can't say I have an understanding. And he goes further into a very beautiful discussion on truth. There is no technique to truth. Truth is a pathless land. He makes that statement. He has made it 50 years ago. How do you receive that statement? He's challenging us, saying, go on, sir, how do you receive it? Do I say I heard it already in 1929, woman camp, etc., etc.? Do I quickly make that connection? I place the historical context. But he's not asking that. He's asking, how do you receive it? So my mind in its anxiety tries to place it in some corner. And he says, this is a dialogue. Do you receive it with opinion? Saying, no, that can't be true. Because hundreds and thousands of people have techniques and methods and systems. They can't all be wrong. This man is coming along and saying there's no path, there's no technique to truth. How can he be right? Thousands of others are saying there are paths. How can he be right? So I construct the opposite, and then I find that the opposite is there and this is there. And then you say, well, who is right in this? Is this man right or is that man right? Are you arguing, comparing, judging? Or do you listen to that statement, not knowing what is right and wrong? Because you don't know. Actually, you don't know. Like Fukuoka discovered saying, I know nothing, don't understand anything. I don't know. But that seems very frightening. That seems very frightening. Divakar, I've sent Ambuja a link. Ask her to join if she wants to. It's very frightening. I have to say, I don't know what the man is saying. I understand the words. Many years ago, I had one of the most revealing moments of my life when I was having a conversation with my daughter about something and I was telling her something. And after listening to me carefully for 5 minutes, which she did very often, she said, Appa, what are you saying? I understand all the words that you are saying, but what are you really trying to say? And there was this person who could understand the words, but also simultaneously knew that she was not getting what was somehow I was attempting to communicate. And as a young child, she had the freedom and psychological wherewithal to say this. But we are often afraid to say this. We don't want to say this. We don't want to expose our ignorance. We don't want to say, sorry, I'm not able to grasp this. Can you please say it differently? So therefore, we seem to understand, but don't understand. So then Krishnaji goes on to say, then he explains, tens of millions of people cannot be wrong. Therefore, he says, I explain. A technique implies practice, time, a mechanistic process. Our minds are already mechanistic enough, and you're making it more mechanistic, right? He explains all that, and you still say 1,000 people have techniques. Do you balance these two and then say, well, I prefer this rather than that? Or receive what is said with complete objective silence? Now, that's a profound statement. When I read it today, early in the morning, I found this was a remarkable statement. Objective silence. Quiet, not knowing what is truth. And when you listen quietly, which means complete attention, then you discover you have an insight into what's being said. Then it is yours and not mine. Then he brings in another term, which is very interesting. So your mind must be extraordinarily open, vulnerable. Otherwise, you don't know. I wonder if we understand. It is very interesting to bring about openness. I think we can understand open-mindedness to some extent. But why is he using the word vulnerable? You see? And then he gives this profound example, you see. Is love an intellectual thing? Technique is an intellectual thing. Method is an intellectual affair. You can love through. But he asks, can you love through a technique? Can you? By practicing being nice, very kind, very gentle. you know all the rest of it, and at the end of the year, having practiced the method, will you love? The questioner then says, no. Impossible, isn't it? So why do you say no? Yes, sir. Because it involves a technique. That's right. Will there be love if you practice kindness, gentleness, non-violence? Will you have at the end of it love? And then again the questioner says no, and Krishnamurti says, we said love can come into being. Can love come into being through any form of intellectual effort as technique? And you said no. What makes you say no? You have an insight that technique is a method. And how can that produce love? So on and so forth. This goes further. He talks about how the observer is observed, being the past, and he observes it through past background, therefore. And he brings this into this question of understanding. So beautiful. His entire teaching seemed to be encapsulated in this talk and the process of understanding, also simultaneously interwoven with understanding. So he says, I don't understand, right? I can't see it. Please tell me another in a different way. Do we have enough freedom, enough vulnerability to say this? I'm not understanding what you're saying. Can you say it again? Can you say it differently? The speaker says the thinker is the thought. There's no thought, there's no thinker. Questioner says right. Then why do you say right? Because you see the obvious right thing, don't you? The experiencer is the experience. So on and so forth. Anyway, you can enjoy this in your communication and in your conversation with yourself and with others who are interested, and read through it. So the meaning of the word understanding, Krishnaji gives a very interesting and a different tone to it. And understanding is, it is that understanding, when we say, it implies almost certainly insight. And if we don't understand, and he talks about openness and vulnerability, are these part of understanding in our experience, in our journey of life, in what we share with people around us? Go on, please. I'm done. I think I have nothing more to say on the subject. I'm open to conversation around this. Yes, please.
Thank you, Gautam ji. It is very well put. Hareshwar ji has a question. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Gautam sir,
Yes.
I want to ask one more thing. Understanding doesn't come like, doesn't work like a memory. It doesn't come and go. Understand, once you understood anything means you have understood it. So can the understanding also change with the time?
Harishji, I think when there is insight is very different. Insight is in the moment, I think. And insight is a much larger thing from what I understand from Krishnaji. And understanding, I have some understanding of things today. And today there is more information comes, tomorrow more information comes. My understanding becomes deeper, or my insight gets a deeper foundation.
But can it change? Vulnerable word he has used.
Sorry?
Vulnerable word he has used. So what he was trying to convey? Vulnerable means what? Mind is vulnerable means it is flexible or pliable infinitely. What is
as I understand it, Rishwar, what
No,
he's saying is,
I am not. I did not say anything.
Dinesh Wagmare.
Another gentleman. Yeah.
oh, sorry.
I'm Dinesh Wagmare. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't catch that, sir. My apologies. Yeah, go on, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Dinesh. So I think when he's using the word vulnerable, I think he's speaking about being honest enough to say, I don't understand. I don't know what you're saying.
Okay.
So,
Yes,
could I say
Saraswati.
something?
This he,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. There are certain things very obvious to my mind. There is one understanding very, very desirable when Krishnji or Gautamji speaks to an audience, including me. Then the urgency and the importance of understanding the full significance and import of what is being said. That is one thing. But there are moments in life when the other is not there. But then also understanding precipitates like a flash of thunder, it arrives. I mean, mankind had seen apples and fruits falling from trees, from time immemorial. But in a certain moment of that flash of light, Newton comes upon the theory of gravity. Same way, we all have heard the stories of Archimedes and how the Archimedes principle came into being. That is insight. Insight is always into something. And there are various issues in life. There is no end to it. I know I will never have even a superficial insight into how quantum mechanics work. Yes, I have a fairly good insight into Newton's third law of motion, because when I hit the wall, I also get hurt. So certain things are simple, but the complex theories and principles of physics, I would never able to even superficially understand. The third thing is, I would say, rather than insight, a kind of reflective silence. And what Gautamji started with Fukuoka, the statement I could share with my friends. I had the privilege when he visited Rajghat in 83 or some 84 or something. Netraji and I had gone to Varanasi station to receive him, and it was such a rare occasion when he came to Varanasi and Rajghat. And, so when he said to understand nothing whatsoever, uh, that is, as again, I was going to say, but Gautamji read out from Krishnji's book, or somebody pointed out, it is probably not understanding, it is not probably not even insight into something, it is wisdom. So that wisdom, that actually there is nothing to understand, because the very instrument of understanding, which is some or another faculty of mind, has to lie quiet, dormant, for the other to come into being. That is wisdom. Now, I am not saying like for me, this is quite a task that I understand Gautamji fully. That also is quite a task. So I have to start there. But at the same time, I cannot lose sight of the importance of the very instrument of understanding falling silent. And I just want to give one analogy. One day, I just thought, did I come into this world through volition, through my choice? I have absolutely no memory. And no Muslim, no Jew, no Christian can say that, yes, I consciously decided, and I decided the country, I decided the woman, lady whom I would hire, or whatever it is. Okay, nobody can say that. So we all are born accidentally. That means what? Logically, Krishnji is often emphasizes this is logical, this is rational. Logically, we all have equal claim to the resources of the world. But at the same time, have the humility or the wisdom to understand that it may be a flash of insight to feel that we all need that our food, shelter, our clothes should be guaranteed, but this is not going to happen overnight. So I don't have to join the Communist Party, or I don't have to believe in Marxism. So this kind of understanding, which is a kind of feeling, a silent thing, precipitates when we are reflecting, and not on a particular topic, but we have allowed some silence in our life, and something dawns on us, and probably that kind of understanding is a kind of perfume. But of course, what we say in Hindi, chota muh badi baat. So, but that is my feeling. And but no, there is no denying that this whole question of understanding has many branches, sub branches, many aspects, dimensions to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Harishji. Gautamji, you want to respond?
That was a comment. I don't know if it's asking for a response. All I can say is that I think Krishnaji is talking about how, when we look at this question of hurt, he talks about how whenever we see something emerging as a fact, we try to free ourselves of it. We build a wall around ourselves, and one desires to jump over that wall because that wall becomes a prison. And the wall becomes a wall of resistance, which implies isolation, bitterness, lack of love, and the rest of it. So the verbal description makes you want to jump over, he says. And the prisoner is enclosed by your own desire not to be hurt. So as we say, we built the wall brick by brick. And he says the speaker describes the wall, the effects of the wall, the bitterness, the sorrow, the isolation, the loneliness, and from that, violence and all that. And once you hear the description of this whole thing, you say, I want to get over that wall. He says this means you have no insight at all as to what has made and built the wall, because we are not willing to just be with the fact of things. If one is concerned with getting free of something which is uncomfortable, then one won't be able to understand it. Whereas if you had an insight into the whole movement of hurt, resistance, isolation, see the whole picture, observe the whole picture. And this seems to suggest that the wall doesn't exist. So it's almost as if there's a completely different approach to avoiding pain, opening oneself out to seeing what is doing, this hurt, this loneliness. Yeah. All this is there in that particular talk which I've shared.
Okay. I think Shakti ji wants to ask something, and then Anand ji. Shakti ji, wherever you are, unmute yourself. Shakti ji. Unmute Shakti ji. Yes.
Yes, sir. I was not allowed to unmute for this.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. You see, you talked about the student who asked, who was talking about the speed, and you said that you are asking this question, that even something like death cannot change your attachment to speed. In effect, you said that. This is my question also, because because this is if I say it is fragmentation, this is a borrowed answer from Krishnamurti. But, and if I say I am the person who has experienced something bad happening to someone and still I am attached to something, and both are me and I have to live with both, that is also borrowed answer from the behaviorism. So I would like, what would you say this to this student of yours who is facing the same problem? Thank you.
No, but sir, I'm not hearing the question, or I'm not hearing what you're saying. You're saying, I am attached and I want to be free. Is that what you're saying? I could not hear the question clearly, so I'm not able to address it. But to me, it seems that Krishnaji is suggesting that can be observed. For instance, he says, understanding what is transforms what is. It's a very profound statement. And that understanding of what is without attempting to change it is probably where our conditioning comes in, kicks in very quickly. When we see something, we immediately want to change it. I see that I'm a tricky person, or I know that I'm trying to get an advantage over other people by maneuvering myself into different positions. I suddenly see this. And I immediately have justification for my behavior. And I immediately have answers why this is how I can be, because there is no other way. Follow? So to just face it and to just stay with this, yeah, this is the kind of person, if from my behavior, if I look, this is the kind of person I am. I do this, I behave in a tricky way. I try to gain advantage, I try to gain attention, I try to gain favors. I want to look better than other people. I'm ambitious. So I think this dichotomy between what is and what should be, what we want it to be, that is what I think Krishnaji's teachings point to. And he, I think, collapses these two and saying both are one. What you want to be is just a thought. What is real. It is factual. Face it. So that is what I would say, Shakti ji.
Thank you, Gautam ji. I think another question coming from Anand ji. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. So my question is, as long as I'm concerned about myself, can there be understanding? Understanding, within quotes, I'm saying, when I say I understand, there must be care and affection. I mean, when there's care and affection, it tells me that I'm sensitive. Now, without being sensitive, I mean, it is not possible for a person to be vulnerable. Now, it's only when a person is vulnerable, when he's not willing to, but when he's prepared to get hurt, probably that is when you're vulnerable, you're also very insecure. Normally, our conditioning is to look for security all the time. So when I say I'm vulnerable, it's only then probably there is a possibility of looking at things as they are. For example, I understand when I put my finger into fire, it burns. That is understanding. I never ever put my finger into fire. But generally, I make mistakes. I say I understand, but I keep repeating the same mistakes. Isn't it so, sir? Oh.
Sir, I mean, you have articulated a series of things which you think one is dependent on the other, and finally from sensitivity onward. I wonder if there's any progression in these things. When Krishnamurti talks about truth being a pathless land, I'm not so sure. They're all separate things, one leading to the other. I wonder if Krishnaji is pointing to just the fact, the observation of the fact, the observation of all that the mind does to escape from the fact, to move from the fact, to escape the fact, to avoid it, to avoid the pain. And therefore, fear, pain, anxiety, all seem to be collapsed into one. So I don't know if there is. And in this particular context, I think vulnerability that he's talking about seems to be able to kind of own up even for oneself that I don't understand. I think to say I don't understand, I don't know what the man is saying, to ask, to be open about it, itself seems such a big barrier, sir. It's so much easier to assume that I understand because I recognize the words.
But since we are communicating here, sir, we are using words, but they all mean the same thing. Understanding, affection, care, vulnerability, they all one. Love, compassion, they're all one. But we are using words here. I mean, we are trying to communicate. So therefore, when I have to say something, we have to use words.
Of course.
So understanding, I mean, again, to put in words, I will not repeat it if I understand it. If I made a mistake, I have understood what it is, and I would never repeat it. The moment I repeat it, it means that I have not understood. Isn't it so?
Sir, that is one way of looking at a mistake. Let's say I have come to a certain conclusion. Conclusions and logic depend on assumptions, right? The starting point. Where you start, then you come to a conclusion. Okay, I have reached a conclusion and it serves me very well in my life. Suddenly, one day I discover that my assumption is faulty. Some assumption I made based on my experience and my community and the country in which I live. I made an assumption that all Koreans are hardworking, or all Tamilians are like this and all people from Madhya Pradesh are like this. I make some assumption. Then suddenly one day, this whole picture changes. For me, I see that the Korean, the Tamilian and the person from Madhya Pradesh are capable of the same kind of horrible brutality. I see they are capable of the same need to protect themselves and not worry about the neighbor. They want to accumulate wealth. I noticed this. And suddenly I say, oh, my assumption was wrong. I can't look at people like this. I can't make this assumption. The assumption is false. To openly accept this would change one's life. It is not just an intellectual affair. I made a mistake till yesterday, yeah. But today I see that there is a completely different, to own that there was an assumption and then look at the assumption and to realize the assumption is false. A student looking out of the window and twirling the pencil around like this in his hair, I think this child doesn't pay attention at all. All teachers here would know it and all of us who have been students would know it. And the teacher gets exasperated and one day decides that he's going to ask this child a question to make it uncomfortable for him to prove that he doesn't understand. That child shocks everybody by giving a beautiful explanation of all that went on in the class. He just did not look interested, that's all. Now, is the teacher willing to say, I was completely wrong in my assumption about this child? Is he willing to say to the child, I'm sorry, I think you were paying very deep attention in your own way. Only I didn't know about it. Or do I have to punish the child saying, yeah, you have got your subject right, but still you have to have a certain decorum. You must look this way. You can't be running a pencil through your hair while you're listening in class. I am proved wrong. But rather than accept my genuine fundamental error, I can turn on the other person, you see. and they'll lean on something else. This is also so brittle, the egos are so fragile, our sense of self-worth is, we can't so easily say, yes, that was wrong. I made a mistake. That seems so difficult to say, sir. It makes us feel vulnerable, but more than vulnerable, it makes us feel insecure. We wonder what the world will think of us. Our foolishness is out on display. Yeah.
Thank you, Gautamji. Anybody else?
Any of the young ones who are here, you are welcome to ask any questions or add your comments if you wish also. You don't have to be only voiceless participants. This is an open forum. All are welcome. It's a lovely forum created by the Indore group. So you're welcome, and everybody is happy that you're here.
Harshadji wants to ask something, and then Mr. Ramarao from Hyderabad. Yes, Harshadji, please go ahead.
Yes. Krishnaji sometimes says that freedom is at the beginning. That means how do we listen? How do we look? And if there is no freedom in listening, then we cannot listen very well. And same way with looking. And everything what Krishnaji is saying, he is saying from his own state of freedom. So, like saying that truth is a pathless land, maybe for him it is like that because he is already free. But can we accept if we are not free and we say, agree with Krishnaji that truth is a pathless land and we don't do anything? And then on the other side, there are traditional people, Buddhists, they show you how to be quiet and they teach you gradually how to be quiet, and then a gradual learning takes place and one begins to look at oneself and others with the freedom. So my question is, can we accept what Krishnaji says, because he says from his own state of freedom? And if we are not in that state, how can we repeat Krishnaji's statements like that? Okay, finish.
Sir, my
I think
question
the
is,
last one is a real question and not a rhetorical question. I will answer it. If one repeats Krishnaji's statement or anybody else's statement, it is pointless because it doesn't reflect our own genuine understanding. You know, in the yoga traditions, Patanjali is supposed to have written some extraordinary books, the Yoga Sutras. Then he wrote a commentary on Panini's grammar. And then he wrote that wonderful text on Ayurveda. One was for the dirt of the body, he said. And one was for the dirt of the mind, for removing the dirt of the mind. Yoga for the dirt of the body. Ayurveda for removing the dirt of the body. Yoga for removing the dirt of the mind. And he talks about the dirt of the spoken word. And that's very profound. I think often when we utter, we just merely relay somebody else's knowledge of things. Somebody else's words we repeat. It may sound very nice, what somebody has said, but to say it as if it's one's own experience, then in this tradition they say it's a dirty word, a word which goes out without your authentic experience behind it is a dirty. So that much I'll say, Harshad.
sir, my question is that is it that means comprehensive understanding means as a complete radical transformation of what it is without that is means like hearing without accumulation and etc.
I think what Krishnaji is pointing to is that when you have, when it is something like this is there, it's finished, he says. You don't go back to it. For instance, I mean, I just shared the screen with you. I mean, I shared it earlier, I'll share it again. Yeah. If you see the truth of it, he says, same way, understanding implies having an insight into a problem. You go beyond all arguments, dialectic. It is so. So I would say that when he says you've understood something, that it changes your life dramatically. I give you an example from physics. Very simple example. I think Professor Krishna may be able to maybe also elucidate this a little bit more. There was a professor in one of these colleges who used to demonstrate things very dramatically in America. So a long pendulum was suspended from the roof, high roof of a building, and he would stand at one end of it or make a student stand. And the pendulum would come up to his nose, a big ball like this, steel ball. Right? And then he would let the pendulum go. It would swing 50, 60 feet and then come back. Now, physics says that this pendulum will not cross the nose because when it travels up and down, it had lost some little bit of energy. Even if it retains its energy, it can only come up to my nose. But when the pendulum is swinging near me, I feel like moving my nose back because I'm scared it's going to get smashed. I can pass an exam in physics, but it has not become blood and bones knowledge. I can't live by it. Okay, this is a simple example of understanding. You can say the person knows physics, he can pass an exam, they do many things. But can he live by it? No. There is a doubt in the body, there's a doubt in the brain, there's a doubt in the eyes. For writing the exam, you can write the formula. But will this pass? No, it won't pass. The pendulum, when it comes near the nose, you can't bear it. Your physics does not help you lead your life.
Very rightly said. We have a few more questions. There is one from, sir, you have not written your name. This is Lenebo TAB.
Yes, sir. Actually, this is Durga, sir. I have been participating in your sessions. Durga Rani Gedela.
Okay.
Sorry, I haven't written my name here. First of all, I just have 2-3 observations, sir. That's all. To Mr. Gautam, it's wonderful listening to you, sir. You are communicating your passion and your understanding very well. I just would like to, say a few, 1 or 2 things. As an educator, I wonder if you see this particular aspect of affection and a particular, sense of, pause in the students. Because what I could gather, you have pointed out all these qualities. Affection is a very primary thing. If you are, as an educator, if you're imparting to the students, and when you are affectionate to communicate something to the students, I'm saying this because I could make out you're an educator, and asking them to, just make a small pause in their day-to-day activities, in their conversations and in their classroom activities and all that. I feel that is the one area, I think, as an educator, I feel, these are the things we can gather from Krishnamurti's teachings rather than going by all verbatim. And all the inherent qualities are, sensitivity, vulnerability, openness. These are the qualities. Rather than going by the verbatim, does one see these qualities in oneself, or what does those qualities mean at all? And the third point I would like to say, sir, very nicely you suggested why it is so difficult for anybody to say, I don't know, and appreciate the other person when he is doing something. It is so difficult for, very nicely you communicated that, sir. When the student is understood so well, why does it take for the teacher to say, okay, yeah, this guy has something in him, I could learn something from him, and you can appreciate that child. And why it is so difficult for people to, get lost in the verbatim of Krishnamurti, such a beautiful, exhaustive teaching, and they don't bother so much about these qualities. This is one thing I would like to communicate. And one more thing, sir, like in all your work, like when we have to understand ourselves, maybe we have to start with our day-to-day problems. The problem is not out there. It is with you. Whatever the problem that comes to your mind, you remain with that. Rather than, Krishnamurti said this, Krishnamurti said that, what? If you have a problem, how will you go about it? Maybe one has to start from there and think from there. This is just want to contribute to whatever you have been suggesting. And
Durga, you are Durga, aren't you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Durga.
Yeah, let me just say a few things. You said several times, I'm speaking to you because you're a teacher and educator. I'd like to just suggest that we are all human beings first and only then other things. Okay. And the challenge for an educator is not separate from the challenge for you or for anybody else, or an advocate or a physicist or a scientist or a mechanic or a parent or anybody else. The challenge is not different. Yes, an educator is somebody who has chosen to live in the field of working with younger people, becoming a resource for them, struggling with the challenges of bringing up children in a world which seems to have abandoned his responsibility. So it is not just that the educator works in isolation. I'd just like to mention that the educator works in the field of whatever is society. And society at the moment, if you look, has found ways of educating the young in our homes, in our drawing rooms, in our mobiles, in our tablets, in the bedrooms. And the world has access to our children without the parents having much say in this matter. There are very strong messages that children are receiving verbally, non-verbally, visually. And these are extremely strong messages. They are loaded with all kinds of values of success, values of aggression and violence, this sexual messaging. These are very, very strong, and they're reaching every home, every child without any barrier. The world is educating our children in ways in which the teacher can barely manage to educate in the few hours and teaching some subjects. The question today for people and human beings is, do we really care for the next generation? And you're talking about affection. Krishnamurti says, if you had love as parents, you would see to it there is no war. We are allowing, earlier we would say to children, don't talk to strangers and be careful and don't have to. Today we have let the market enter our homes in whichever way with whatever messages, and we have handed over we have literally made our children vulnerable. Where is the affection, madam? And affection is not just something which is a very gentle, caring, patting on the back thing. Affection means you take a position. Affection means you make sure children have a bath. Affection means you have to tell children sometimes things which they may not like. There's also the affection of this, of clarity, of feeling responsible for the other person. And as regarding dialogues and talks, I think it's not just a little bit of a chit chat at the beginning or the end of a class or something. Are we available with our experiences for dialogue with the young? To share the certainties with which we grew and how we discovered that these certainties and these aspirations we had collapsed along the way? Are we willing to share our own stories of complete frustration, our helplessness with the young growing people and say, look, we don't know, we have not discovered answers. Yeah, we have grown bigger, we have got some money in the bank, maybe we have built a house, we have caged ourselves, but the kind of things that Krishnamurti is talking about, we also don't know. Can we please talk together? Is the adult willing to get off the pedestal? Krishnamurti said this to teachers, but I would extend this to adults. Are we willing to consider that as a possibility? Or do we think we know and we have to tell the children and the children have to get it? That time is gone, madam. the time of telling is finished. To use a metaphor from nuclear energy, the neutrons, when they move around, there are the thermal neutrons. The fast neutrons are what are released from atoms. They travel very fast. They go right through. They are like ideas. They travel across the universe very fast. But then you slow them down with moderators. Krishnamurti says, can we go into it slowly? You slow them down, and then the chance of contact with others increases. And in the contact with others, extraordinary things happen. And do we want to enter into this zone of slow, affectionate communication, not from a superior point of view with others? As our wisdom and as our history, has it taught us this? I mean, that's the question I would like to ask.
It cannot be used as passive.
George Selvakumar wants to say something. I think he got a hand up.
Yes, Mr. Gautamaji. Yeah. Actually, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, there's some kind of a misunderstanding which we have here about the usage of the word called insight. Because the word insight explained in that context which have been showing the slideshow, screenshots. Actually, when you say, if you have an insight into something, you will not repeat it again. So that not repeating it again or not doing it in the future comes in terms of time. But I think Krishnaji is not explaining that in terms of time, because it denotes as if it is forever, once it is there. I think Krishnaji says, that is, if the same situation comes, you work it out on it and come to that again. You pick it up from there. Not it is stored there. Once you got it, you will never do it again. I think it doesn't mean like that. Maybe in that context, it may feel that Krishna is talking in that sense. But actually, if you talk about insight, it is not in terms of time at all. Whether how you arrive at it comes in a flash, right? So to quote an example, I say, suppose you see a fan which is running at full speed, you won't be able to see the blade. Only if it comes if it slows down, you can see the blade. So the fast movement. So that fast movement, you grasp it and you work it on it and you come again. It is not something you get it and it stays forever. You will not do it again. I think there's some kind of a misunderstanding. Can you please go into that and brief me in that, sir?
Thank you, George, for bringing in that. I hope you don't mind my referring only to your first name. That was a very important point you made, but I think let's consider this. Now, I think there is some truth in what you're saying, but let's consider this. Christ said, if somebody strikes you on one cheek, you show the other cheek. Mahatma Gandhi embraced this truth and lived his life that way also. When violence was all around him, he refused to hit back. Now, I can't say today when somebody strikes me that I will show the other cheek. And after 1 week, when somebody strikes me, I might hit back. Because that day I'm feeling different about it. In that case, it is embedded in time. I agree with you. I think the way Krishnamurti is talking about understanding, when he says it is when you've got it, I think it's blood and bones knowledge. That big lump of steel which is in the pendulum. I cannot say today I have understood it and I'm able to keep my eyes closed and not move when the pendulum comes back. But tomorrow, when it comes, I'll move back depending on the state of my mind. In that case, I mean, maybe what you're saying is that insight may come and insight may go and one may not be able to hold on to the insight. Yes, maybe, I don't know about it. And maybe I think what you're right, it's not in time. It's not like, I cannot say I've had the insight and therefore it has become a cornerstone in my life. I cannot say that maybe. But if it's an insight and it's fundamentally transformed me, will it be possible, or will I go back to an older kind of behavior?
Sorry to interrupt, sir. So if you go into the concept of that is what is, the case is what is contains the past, present and the future. It is not something in that case, that's what you can't hold it as such. Maybe it is suitable and in the context which you have put. But when it comes, you have to work it again and again. That's what. Whether how fast you work it out, you may not be aware of that. So it comes in flashes. Because if you hold on to that insight becomes a security.
Yeah, no. If insight becomes a security, it becomes a thought.
Yeah, again, you go back, you go after that. Then you
Yes.
make it into a concept. So that thing has to be cleared by oneself. Not that I expect your help to clear it.
Well, I don't have any more comment on this. I think you have said, and I think I've shared whatever I can. I think what you have said is correct and accurate where Krishnaji's teachings are concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gautamji. Thank you. I think we have reached the end of our session now. Ghanshyam, should we close it now? Sushil,
We wanted some comment from Professor Krishna, and
okay.
so because guest speaker has also said that he will be giving some comment.
Okay. So may I request Professor Krishna to say something as a closing comment, sir?
Yeah, I have nothing more to say. I think I'm finished. I think Professor Krishna can speak and then you can wind down. It's 1.5 hours is up, I think.
Yeah. I don't see Professor Krishna.
Maybe he's got disconnected or maybe he's gone.
So in that case, announcement of his lecture, next lecture is necessary.
But
the future is now by him.
I think Professor Krishna has perhaps left. So we can close, sir. And once again, thank you so much, Gautamji, for accepting our invitation and being with us. Next week, which is 2nd May, Sunday, we'll have to talk about the future is now. The session will be at 11 a.m. So we'll communicate and send meeting details to all people who have been here. With these words, I once again thank you, Gautamji, and thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Dubey sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone. Thanks. Thanks, Dubeji. Thank you.
Thank you.